Thanks for joining us this evening. This is the Aspen City Council work session for January 22nd, 2024. A couple items on our agenda this evening. We've got a quick discussion with response, grants program update, and then we have a APCHA discussion with our representatives from our City Council and a discussion of Next Gen Advisory Commission. We're going to start off with a response. Shannon is here, so if you want to come up to this front table and just take a seat there in the middle, that'd be great. All right. And Jen, you want to introduce?
Yes, please. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm here this evening with a request from Response for additional funds to complete the first domestic abuse center in the Roaring Fork Valley. The request is for an additional $100,000 from the tobacco tax revenues. The city's established grant programs do not fund capital campaigns. Just as a reminder, tobacco tax dollars are collected for health and human services, tobacco-related health issues, addiction, substance abuse, education, and mitigation. So health and human services is an acceptable use of these funds. And with that, I'll hand it over.
All right, thanks. Do you want to hand these out? I brought some updated renderings of the building, which are fun. And I have our brochures. I know I handed some of these out last time, but if ever anyone wants one. So thank you for the previous funding for this project. It's been quite a wild ride for the last 11 months trying to raise money to make this project a reality. Our budget, as with most budgets in construction over the last year, have gone up about 30%. And we find ourselves $470,000 short of our final, latest and greatest construction numbers. We are under contract now, so that's not going to change. We have broken ground on the project. Sam was there in mid-November when we made a small hole in the ground and then began to dig up. Our property is in the floodplain, so it's mounded up. We are one of the crazy projects that's building all through the winter. We poured concrete 2 weeks ago, that super freezing cold week, because that's just what the schedule was. And we can't slow down because survivors are waiting for us to open the doors of the shelter. Right now, we are on track to still open the first week in January 2025, so a little bit less than a year out, and we just have this final push to raise what we need to make this project a reality. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the project, about the funding raising so far, about what it's going to be like when it's completed, whatever you'd like.
Thanks, Shannon. I also want to thank you for really a wealth of information that you supplied to us, which is very helpful for us to be prepared for meetings like this. So thank you so much for that. Council members, at this time, are there any questions?
Just curious who your builder is.
GF Woods.
Great. Thanks.
This is a work session, so we can just have direction to have this come back to us at a regularly scheduled meeting. So with that, I mean, no questions from the table, so I'll just look around and say, are you interested in Seeing this again come to us?
I want to see this come to us again. I can't think of a better way to spend tobacco tax money.
I agree. This is really, Response is a very important local nonprofit that we need to support as much as possible.
Thank you, guys.
Definitely, yes.
Agree.
All right.
Okay. Short but sweet.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Shannon.
And congratulations. I mean, the hardship of construction here is well known, but persevering you are, so congrats. Thank you. That'll bring us down to our grants program update.
So council, we've prepared about a 20-ish minute presentation for you, and then to get into direction in a general sense. We do have a member of our steering committee online with us, Tracy Anderson, as well as a partner over at Aspen Community Foundation, who we've been collaborating with significantly to improve the grant process for all of our nonprofits here in the Upper Valley. I just wanted to let you know at the start here, there's really two key things we're looking for from this conversation today. First is how you feel about how funds are spent now, wide across many organizations, or should it be more outcome focused and go deep focused on the outcomes you're looking for in the community, which would mean funding less organizations to accomplish with your current funding stream. You don't have to answer that question now, but we do want to kind of do a straw poll, get some temperature reading of which of those routes is good. And then secondly, to take that information and move a bit forward is give some leniency and some support to your grants steering committee members, these community appointed members you have, to look at the grants program and come back to you with perhaps some policy suggestions. As you saw in the memo, there are some questions at the end. We're not expecting you to respond to all of those today, but really your steering committee could be a great asset into exploring those and coming back to you with some suggestions on how to refine the program. So with that, I'll turn it over to the staff team. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Patrick Quick. I'm the Director of the Strategy and Innovation Office. And we do some internal consulting work with departments, but as a part of that, we also manage the Aspen Grants Program, so that's why we're before you today. We want to give you just a brief update and some structural information about the program, as well as some celebration of some key wins we've had over the last couple of years since we took over the program. And then lastly, to outline some challenges as the program has become more popular in the community, demand has increased. And so with that, I want to introduce our Deputy Director, John Barker, and our Grants Coordinator, Natalie Blumentritt. Both of them manage the program from day to day. So, John.
Thanks, Patrick. And I want to echo Sarah's comments, thanking Tracy Anderson on our Grant Steering Committee for being online, and Ann Mullins, the chair of our steering committee, was planning to be here today, but at the last minute was unable to make it. So I want to go over a quick agenda, and then I'm going to start with the end in mind here with our key question for council to have you ruminate on as we go through a little bit of background information and update on the program to help you give direction. Oh, and that's Judy Clausen from our steering committee is here as well. Hi. So we'll start with a quick overview. I want to give council an update on some of our customer experience improvements that we're really proud of that we've been working on over the last couple of years. Dig into some more of the details on the program and the budget constraints that Patrick was alluding to, end with a timeline, and then the discussion and questions from council. So I'm going to just read this question out loud. It was also included in the memo. Should staff and the Grant Steering Committee explore revisions to the historic funding philosophy that is currently resulting in the widely dispersed allocation of grant funds to community nonprofits. And so what this really means is we've been very lucky as a grants program to have continuing and growing interest from all areas of the Roaring Fork Valley over the last few years. And what that has done is it's created, we have about 130 organizations that receive cash funding from the city. And as that demand has gone up, right, our historic philosophy has been to fund nearly every applicant that meets minimum committee assessment requirements with at least some funds. As the number of applicants goes up and the number of cash, the value of cash requests go up, that necessarily means those funds get spread thinner and have less impact for each organization. So that's the key question that we have of council today. If there are any clarifying questions on what we're looking for, and if not, I'll dig into the rest of the presentation. So I want to start with the backbone of our grants program, which is the program philosophy adopted by council. I know most of you have seen this before. I'll give you a moment to reread it, but every decision that the steering committee makes, that staff makes around what changes that we make to the grant program, we refer to this statement to make sure that we're staying true to council's intent for the grants. And that is supported by the specific strategic focus areas for each division of the grant. So our health and human services, arts and culture, and community nonprofit all have clarifying language also adopted by council about exactly what your goals are for our grants programs. So some quick numbers. We had, and that is Chris Mingus, another steering committee member as well. So we're getting majority representation here pretty quick. Really proud that over the last 13 years, the grants have distributed more than $17 million, and that's going up quickly. That is a tremendous amount of funding to be able to give out to our nonprofits in our community, and excited to tell you a little bit more about the impact we've been able to achieve with those funds. As I alluded to, right, we have 3 primary divisions within our grants. A key distinction here is when you look at these 3 divisions, don't look at them as organizations, right? We look at this as applications. So depending on what an individual organization is trying to achieve with their specific grant application, it may change which grant division they're in. So one organization may be in community nonprofit one year based on what they're trying to achieve, and that may change to health and human services the next. And that is a decision that's assessed by staff as we read each application, and we sometimes move them around. We have our 2 methods of support, right? This is cash, which forms the vast majority of the support that the grant program gives out. But we're also very lucky to be able to have an in-kind grant program as well, where we allow access to city services and facilities like use of the skating rink at the Arc, performing art space at the Wheeler, things like that. And then I'll touch on a little bit more later in the presentation, but we have 3 active pilot grants as directed by council in the health and human services and arts and culture spaces. So a quick structural reminder of how the grants decision-making works. Right at the top, we have you all as city council. You have interviewed and appointed 5 members of our community as actually currently 4 members of the community and 1 staff member, but that will be changing later this year, as a steering committee who serves as a liaison between what you direct and the policies and outcomes that we achieve in the grant program. The steering committee then interviews and appoints 3 groups of 5 review committees that assess all of the applications that come in through our primary grant program. For our pilot grants, those are typically assessed directly by the steering committee, and then if they become permanent, we would look into standing up a specific review committee for those as well. So just a quick overview of all the different community volunteers primarily that make this program possible. We have a few staff members involved, of course, but I want to highlight our steering committee in particular, and how they've really stepped up to provide insight and asked hard questions about our grants program to make sure it's performing as well as it can. And they've also adopted a mentorship role, which each of our review committees, as you can see here. Ann Mullins has volunteered after many, many years overseeing our Health and Human Services reviews. She's now providing mentorship to our Community Nonprofit Committee. Tracy Anderson is doing the same for Health and Human Services, and Judy Clausen behind me is involved with the Arts and Culture Review Committee. And those committees are all three active right now reviewing applications for 2024. So I want to back up a little bit and give council some context about how we got to where we are today. The first of which some of you have heard about in 2021 and 2022. We retained a third-party expert consultant who assessed our grant program right before the Strategy and Innovation Office took over administration and provided some high-level action items for us to help align us with best practices. We also retained them for the year immediately after that to conduct stakeholder surveys, make sure that the changes that we were implementing were working, and also find areas for continued improvement. Since that time, staff and the steering committee in particular have been focused on improving the applicant and volunteer experience. So that looks at things like conducting regular trainings for all types of stakeholders. This is steering committee members, review committee members, applicants, making sure that we are putting our faces and names out in the community and people know how to get in touch with us, how to submit a compelling application, and just understand all of the rules and eligibility requirements. I also want to give Natalie a big kudos here for implementing a new grant software that has really transformed the reviewer and applicant experience to make it much, much smoother, and also allowed us to better collect data and understand at a more quantitative level the impact that our grants are having in our community. And to that end, we've also recently introduced impact and outcome reports, which ask our applicants to give us some of that quantitative and qualitative information about how city funds have been able to have been used, how they were actually used throughout the course of the grant period, lessons learned for them, and get nice things like testimonials as well. But these impact and outcome reports have become a central component to how we assess whether a program was successful and how to look at improvements moving forward. So these improvements have been working, which is really exciting. I wanted to share with council one question that we sent out in our after grant survey this summer that I'm particularly proud of. So we asked, while acknowledging that your grant award, this is to anyone who applied for a grant, while acknowledging that your grant award may be different than what you hoped for, to what extent do you believe your grant application will be treated fairly and consistently by the city's grant program? And on a scale of 5, you can see 98%-ish of applicants gave us a 4 or 5, and one applicant rated us a 3, and that was our lowest. So you can see these changes that we've been working have really helped to build trust in our applicants, and that's something that the steering committee is focused on maintaining and even improving moving forward. So now we get into some of the numbers. I wanted to show this slide because it just articulates the rapidly increasing demand that we've seen in our program. Right? It's doubled in 4 years, from about 1.6 million to nearly 3.4 million, and this is just cash requests. It does not include in kind, which is about another 200,000. And this is across all three of the primary grant divisions.
For the same amount of requesters, or are there
No,
more
it's
requesters?
grown, that number's grown about 30 to 40% over the same period, from about 90 applicants to about 130.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? So here are our program budgets for 2024, to give you a little bit of additional context. So arts and culture, which is funded by the Arts and Culture Real Estate Transfer Tax, has $900,000 allocated to the primary grant period that is open right now. Community nonprofit is funded by the general fund. It's got about $555,000. And Health and Human Services this year has $220,000 available. And then we have a hard budget of $157,000 in in-kind services set by council last year.
Do you know how much money the Arts and Culture Fund took in in 2023?
I don't have that information in front of me, but can get back to you.
Well, let me check. You should have a December budget to actual.
Yeah,
but
that's what I
it
thought.
probably won't be released quite this early.
No, but I think it was higher than 900,000.
Oh, certainly, and based
Yeah.
upon the direction, however, given how to spend the funds, the intention is to maintain a rather large fund balance in there from the direction the staff received. The one other thing I would just say, Health and Human Services side, you're seeing the program budget just for the grant side. There is a substantial amount of funds the city gives in intergovernmental agreements to Health and Human Services as well.
I believe that's about $350,000 in IGAs.
A couple quick questions on this. Arts and culture is 900 now. Wasn't it about half that a couple years ago?
Yeah, great question. So for quite a while, it was static at 400,000.
Yeah.
In 2022, I believe, council raised it from 400 to 600, and then it's been static at 900 the last 2 years.
And then my other question is about community nonprofit coming out of the general fund. Are those, how do we come up with that number?
It's a historic trend number. I can't find any documentation of how previous councils came to this resolution. It's just been, we raise that number by whatever the goods and services number is each year. And so, right, it was 4% for this year. I should know this off the top of my head. 4%, yeah. Sorry, we debated different numbers. So it raises incrementally with that goods and services typically. So it's really under council's purview, but these are really programs serving locals in this category. And so it's everything from the ice skating club to, where our bears go when they have to be relocated from this area.
And then Health and Human Services, that funding comes from, I'm sorry, what?
The general fund.
Oh, it is as well. Okay.
There was, historically, for a few years, there was some funds from the tobacco tax that supplemented that base number from the general fund.
Okay. Thanks. Bill?
Sarah, what did you mean by goods and services? The inflation rate of goods and services or something else?
Each July, council agrees on a rate to raise goods and services by, and we look at CPI and we look at local indicators, make a recommendation to you. Most years it's only about 2%, but the inflationary costs have caught up with us, staying at the 2%. The reason councils do that is so that there's less supplementals for core services, because then that goods and services increase captures those expenses instead of, like I said, you having 20 supplementals that are like, just to keep this program going, I need another $10,000 this year.
Got it, thanks.
Any other questions on this slide? So here I want to dig into
Yes.
Sorry, I was expecting an expense slide as part of your budget? Do you have that coming later, or not at all?
The expense costs were approved within the city manager's department, so they are only labor and a software license. There are not, the advertising costs are actually rather low for this program, and so they're all that administrative overhead component to do the work. So everything else, we have most of the systems in place for already.
Got it. And do we have like an administrative efficiency goal in mind on an annual basis for the work that you do?
We haven't done an overhead cap, like, for example, you know, how Morning Star will be like, it's less than 4%, or it's at 10%. We do not have that. Council has never set a target for us. This program has the equivalent of about 1.2 FTEs associated with it to manage all of the activities that happen in it.
All right, do we have a general sense of what our administrative efficiency percentage is?
Yeah, so I can provide a little bit more context on that. For most grant programs throughout the country, there's the administrative expenses is between 7 and 9% of program budget, and the city of Aspen is about 4%.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm hoping to show with these slides is a little bit of information about how budget and requests stack up over the last 2 years. So arts and culture, you can see in green our budget, which is the same in 2023 and 24, is $900,000. 2023 cash requests were $1.15 million. 2024 cash requests were about $1.4 million. Individual unique applications in the program grew from 31 to 35. For community nonprofit, we get our budget number of 555. That was balanced by a request of about 965,000 last year and little over 1.2 million this year. Unique applications grew from mid-40s to mid-50s. And finally, Health and Human Services, our budget of $220,000 last year. We had $430,000 in requests. This year, $973,000. So pretty clear this HHS has had the most growth, and you can see based on the amount of requests, the spreading thin concern that we're bringing to council tonight. Applications have gone up as well for HHS, but as you can see, it's primarily in the individual ask amounts is where that growth number is reflected this year. So quick timeline as for sort of what's next. For this year, one of the things that we responded to, minor change of the program based on that results of that same stakeholder survey where I included the question about trust, is we heard from applicants that the application window was stressing them out a little bit based on it closing over the holidays. So we moved that up a month and opened it from in October and ran it through early December instead of late December. We did a quick staff eligibility review and sent those applications along with training to our review committees where they are currently being assessed. Those will come back to us at the city in late February, where they'll be considered by the grant steering committee and then back to you all for your approval expected in the end of March, and cash going out to grantees in early April of 2024. And I want to give a quick summary of what's going on with the pilot programs Council has directed the steering committee and staff to implement, and then we'll wrap up with our discussion question. So as a reminder, there are 3 pilot programs that are active right now. We have our Asset and Acquisition Assistance Grant, which provides grants of up to $50,000 for arts and culture nonprofits with a physical presence in Aspen to make minor capital projects or equipment purchases to help them with high-impact programming. And that was a budget of $250,000 that is also funded by the Arts and Culture RET. We will have more information to share with council when those impact and outcome reports are due at the close of the grant period in June. Also ongoing right now is our Cultural Vibrancy Fellowship, which is the city's first ever grant program targeted to individuals. This supports both youth and adult artists with cash stipends, and is focused on building new artistic communities and connections throughout Aspen. And both the youth and adults have had their first facilitated convenings, and the early returns from both facilitators and participants is that it's working really well and is really exciting. So really happy to hear that. And then lastly, we have our capacity building grant, which is about providing nonprofit development for nonprofit leadership. So so for executive directors and board chairs for health and human services nonprofits to help them be more impactful and viable and sustainable. The first year of that pilot just recently closed with a presentation to city staff and the steering committee at the end of December. And we expect to open applications for 2024 with a few process improvements in the spring. And with that, I'll bring it back to the question of the day for council. And also open up for any other broader questions about the presentation or the grants program.
Bill.
Thank you. Firstly, thanks to John and team for all your work on this and the presentation today. Sure, thanks. Thanks to John and the team for all your work on this and your efforts on this presentation, and a big thank you as well to the committee members. I think that these programs are something I'm really proud of in our community, and something that sets Aspen apart and reinvests in our community in the right ways. I think, I'm definitely not surprised that the demand side for these grants has exploded. The amount of wealth that has relocated to Aspen in a post-COVID and during COVID era is pretty substantial, and nonprofits are going to chase that wealth wherever it goes. So not surprised by that at all. I think it will continue to grow significantly, that demand request, and so it's timely and intelligent of you to be asking us to reevaluate that, and I reevaluate the approach, and I appreciate that. To me, the choice is pretty obvious. We have the framework and the infrastructure set up with great committee members who are experts in their respective fields to discriminate on the needs and the applications and the impact and the outcomes. That's what they're there for. And if we're just giving out the money equally or distributing it to as many people as we can, there's sort of no point in having a committee, if you ask me. So without question, C for me, reallocate the funding based on merit. And merit alone, I'm not, I think that the criteria that you had in your guidelines was very good. I do not want to see that criteria evolve to have fluffy type of stuff. Not interested in that at all, but I do like the current criteria, and I do like the makeups of the committees, and I think strong support for option C here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Any other questions, comments?
Comments, yeah.
Sam, take you.
I guess one of my chief concerns is when I look at this, I see the max grant request of 100,000. I would go higher, and I would do that with the idea that it is a meritocracy. What are tax dollars for but to provide for people, and what a luxury to live in this community and have so many tax dollars to see your tax dollars put to good use like this. I'm looking at the the ledger from this past year, and we collected over $23 million in real estate transfer taxes. And the funds that require the real estate transfer tax, I think, should use it. So I think I'd like to see a raise in the 100,000. I'd like to see more money allocated to those funds, and I'd like to see a meritocracy where maybe not everything is given, but the things that are worthy should be used because we have the money for it, rather than just sitting in a bank account collecting dust or even interest. It still should be used for people each and every year, as long as the grant steering committee believes so. And then I did have a question about B as far as location eligibility. I'm not sure if you touched on that or I missed it, but I'm guessing you don't need to be entirely in the city of Aspen to be eligible for a grant, correct?
Yeah, so just a quick background on that. So our primary grant programs, which we spent most of the presentation discussing, council has defined eligibility for that as the Roaring Fork Valley, which we pretty much define as, you know, the RAFTA service zone. So people from Aspen to Rifle are eligible. Council has changed that a little bit with some of these new pilot programs that are more restricted to organizations with a physical presence in Aspen.
Yeah, and I think for me, and I would think most people, I'm not sure if it needs to be revised as much as, once again, I lean on the grant steering committee to grant meritocracy from number C, or letter C, and to, you know, choose the grants that are going to be most impactful for City of Aspen residents and the community at large. That seems to make the most sense to me. I'm not sure if it needs to be a written rule, but I would think that's what they're doing anyway, especially if C actually is meritocracy.
I'm just going to ask council to maybe revisit that, right? So the direction I've been given since 2017 overseeing this program was to acknowledge our workforce and the support services that many of our workforce here in the city of Aspen need, even though they may reside elsewhere. So whether that's the River Bridge Center providing services while based out of Garfield County that support up here, but also support the workforce that works up here. Youth Zone's another example of one of those. There's multiple in Basalt. I think that if that philosophy, if there's a potential that philosophy is changing, I'd really appreciate, Mr. Mayor, a conversation about that, because that's a critical piece for the grant steering committee to understand in its work.
Well, to be clear, my idea when it comes to meritocracy is like a triage system where you give money to the benefit of the City of Aspen residents first, and then you do the whole wider community second. Not that I see that as a bad thing. These are City of Aspen taxes, and hopefully we have enough money for the community at large, which is why I'd like to expand on the Arts and Culture Fund, because we have plenty of money in it.
The one thing I would add onto Sam's comments based on what Sarah just stated is I would defer to the steering committees to make a decision on the impact to Aspen and our workforce and our community, whether the nonprofit has a physical presence in Aspen or not. You know, they are the experts in those respective fields, I would hope, and if they say that there's a nonprofit in Rifle that's really doing a lot of good for Aspen because of XYZ, and the nonprofit can explain that well, and the committee can explain that well and justify that, then I would support that entirely.
Fully agreed.
Thank you. We'll come back to that for some clearer direction. Again, we're really asking, through this work session, we're really giving the opportunity for looking at some of these questions a little bit deeper. We're not necessarily needing to make these decisions or this direction right now. We're looking to get information and give it back to some of the committee members in order to look at that. John and Ward, questions and comments, and I'll let you guys go. I have a couple of questions for them, but if you have any statements or questions now, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really pleased with the progress we've made in this, the whole process. Obviously, there's still work to be done, especially with the clamor for our funds, but I think we're off to a great start. Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the hard work, and I think we've made progress. I have questions about whether, I don't have the answers, but whether by just really emphasizing and extending major funding to the larger nonprofits that show highest scoring, sometimes I think it is discouraging innovation and perhaps missing some of the smaller organizations that have niche returns or niche focuses. I definitely want to benefit these nonprofits, to benefit the people in the Roaring Fork Valley. These are funds that we talk about regionalism, but then we oftentimes throttle that in, and so we only want to spend the money here. But I think we should benefit the community up and down the valley where there is a need, and I think the list of the many applicants indicates that that is the case. I don't want to discourage missed opportunities for some innovative ideas from smaller organizations. And I think sometimes that some of these reports, impact and outcome reports, for example, they for a smaller organization, it stresses the core competencies of the people that are putting that forward, where larger nonprofits have staff to do this and can create really good reports. So for those that are struggling to supply the services, to have to focus their energies in an area where they don't have a lot of experience is somewhat of a challenge to them. So I don't want to miss the opportunities that are presented by those smaller entities. So just by rewarding only to those that get the highest scores, I think that has to be tempered by looking at the smaller ones as well. But I do certainly support up and down the valley. And as far as reduction of the grant, spreading the money around to more people or focusing in on a few people, that's where my question about, I don't have the answer. I don't want to lose some of those people that are really highly motivated to give support to people that are really benefiting from it but aren't part of a large organization. So some of the grant writing skills that some of the providers are lacking, I don't want that to hurt their opportunity to serve the community.
Yeah, thank you for that. The importance of small organizations is a core tenet of what we're trying to do with our grants. And just as a reminder, so one of the two items, so the impact and outcome report you mentioned, we totally recognize some of the more quantitative metrics it's not appropriate for our smaller organizations. So what we ask for in those impact and outcome reports looks different based on how much money you were awarded. And then secondly, the way that our funding allocations are currently set up is for organizations that request $10,000 or less. We try, it depends on budget and things, of course, but that first $10,000 of award, we do our best within our funding formula to protect that. So if someone requests $50,000 and someone requests 10, it's relatively easier to get that 10,000, to get 80% of $10,000 versus as opposed to 80% of $50,000, if that makes sense. So, try and set expectations a little bit differently for organizations that request a smaller amount of money.
Yeah, and I think a 4.6 out of 5 is a pretty good indication that you're doing a good job. And from what I've heard from some of the people that are writing grants is that when they need help, that they get it from the city, and that's certainly appreciated and needed.
And we have Natalie to thank for that.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks. John? Anything else?
No, I would agree with pretty much everything Ward said. I do think our grants should be spread around a little more, and Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. A couple maybe questions. I guess I want to start off with a question for you about, like, where are our flaws, right? So last year, for example, when it came to our community nonprofits, I think I heard back from maybe 2 applicants that were disappointed or just funded at a lower level than they wanted. And that's not bad. You know, going back years, I can remember where a lot of our grant process was questioned by applicants just because we didn't have the transparency in the process that we do now. So first I would ask you, you know, where's our flaw? And what I mean by that is, so yes, we have more requests than we have funding. But is that okay? You know, and I'm looking back at some of the committee members, is our goal to fund everybody? Like, would we want just more money in these pots? As Sam was talking about right now, the arts and cultural grants have a funding source that has been reliable to good numbers, and we're accumulating well beyond what we're allocating towards our grant process. So that one I could see us adding to and being able to fund more, okay? But the Health and Human Services and other grants coming from the general fund, I don't really know the nexus of what funds should be returned through this grant program to the community. So again, that's all just one simple question, or not simple question, is that's what I would like to hear back from the steering committee or committee members. You know, what are we talking about if we're looking to make improvements? What is the improvement we're looking to make? Are we looking to have more funding available in order to distribute? Well, that's a conversation that I think we can have. I will be very clear here. This is always confusing to me. And a couple years ago, I spent time with the Health and Human Services Grant Committee in order just to get a better understanding about how we do this. And I still don't know that direct nexus of these are the funds that are allocatable through this program. So anyway, I start with that kind of saying, like, process improvements, sure. But the overarching question is about, like, how can we get more money to the worthwhile organizations, right? Regardless of location eligibility, regardless of the max grant request, et cetera, what is our structure, what are we trying to do? Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, so this is totally discretionary giving by the city, so it's completely in council's control. That's the first thing to recognize, just where the authority lies. You make an appropriation in the budget every year for these expenditures, and we award to that limit that you set in your giving. So certainly it is council's prerogative to change budget numbers if you want. At any point, whether you want to increase. My concerns with the general fund, or what you hear every time, is just let me know what your priorities are for this fund. And you can have more than one priority for sure to help support how you'd like to go forward. How the program works is right now wide and shallow rather than narrow and deep in its giving, right? And there's a bit of political courage in you changing that. I just want to put it out there on the floors, because you will disappoint some organizations who may no longer be funded or funded the way they are today. And you will, as a council, need to wrestle with that. And the steering committee wrestles with that significantly as well, and why they're asking for permission to really deep dive that issue and see what that could look like. Because it may mean, right now the council's split on this issue just from the conversation here tonight and straw polling, is that there will be organizations that could perhaps not meet the standards for bigger awards. I'll give you an example of one is audited financial statements. At some point, an award is high enough, we need to request audited financial statements. Some of these organizations don't necessarily operate that way. right? So those are kinds of the responsibilities you'll have as a fiduciary, your fiduciary role. But really, if we can have permission for the steering committee to go back and work on that for you. I think the program has been simplified. It has had a lot of transparency added to it. The criteria are based upon best practices in each of the 3 focus areas. And, we'll continue to go forward. But this is really an opportunity of whether you want to keep the current status quo, or if you want the steering committee to dive in, and it's a worthwhile use of their time to dive in to look at this further for you.
And so I'll share my input here is that I am not interested in narrowing it. When I look at these 3 questions, instead of a reduction in the max grant request, I would be more interested in finding more funding availability. When it comes to the revisions of local location eligibility, I still am supportive of kind of the process that we have now, where the impact for Aspen is being recognized as a criteria, that regardless of where they are located. And then, again, the item C here, for me, I'm not looking really to narrow it. I guess in my understanding of it right now, I appreciate the widely dispersed allocations. So I heard a little bit, maybe a little bit of narrowing here, but not necessarily, depending on funding availability. But I did hear that widely distributed funds is, so I agree with you. It is a little bit split on that as a philosophy. So after sharing my input, I would then again look back to committee members, because again, sitting here, I don't know if there is a better approach from the people that are actually doing this work. And I'd be interested in hearing that.
So what we'll do is, we will work with the committee. I feel like we have enough direction here right now, in a general sense. We will come back and I'm going to have the committee develop more than one scenario. That's what we're going to need from them because of the split right now that I'm seeing. And so that you can talk about the pros and cons of those different scenarios to help you refine your decision-making with more information. Would that work for the council?
Yeah. I have one question, though. Do you score applications currently, correct?
The reviewers do.
The volunteer review committee does.
And does that go into allocation of funds currently?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so there is a level of meritocracy going on already.
Yes, of course. It is 100% driven by reviewer assessments based on the review criteria.
Well, then, just to be clear, like, when we send this back for them to review on the grade steering committee, it's really answering the question that I would want to know is, do you want to spend more money on certain initiatives than others? Because if you're giving money to the lower scored applicants just because you feel like you have to, why are you doing that? Only because you have to? Then it seems like a waste of money to me. And I put it on them to be like good and upstanding citizens who know what this community wants and how to spend the money. But why even grade it if you're forced to give money to people that get low grades?
Well, it's not
the amount, because it impacts the amount and exactly that, their merit score. It determines.
No, but I'm just saying, if the grant steering committee, if they don't have the latitude to give more money to a higher scoring applicant that they think would be more impactful to the community, they should have that latitude if they deem that a better use of funds than giving it to low scoring applicants only because they feel like they have to versus.
And the award system does that already.
Yeah.
How the scores translate into a dollar award, that formula includes that rating. So higher the rating, the higher percentage of their requests they're likely to receive. So that's built in, but I will say it's still, the philosophy has been everyone gets a bit, which means still you're reducing, because you gave these $3,000 awards over here, that's $9,000 that didn't go to someone else who another entity that scored higher.
Just because you applied.
Well, are there some applications that do not get funding?
A very few. I think historically probably more than 95% of applications get at least something. And what that, the other side of that is the example from the memo, right? Where last year highest scoring overall from all three divisions application, had like a 4.8 something out of 5. And they requested, I think, $100,000, and they got 61,000.
We saw that.
Yeah. So I think like that's, if to answer your original question, Mayor, about where is the flaw, it's not necessarily a flaw, but it is sort of our core challenge, right? Of how do we create the most positive community impact possible, and is that funding at a higher percentage our best applications, or is it widely dispersing a smaller amount of money across, at a much wider dispersal?
I also just want to point out really quickly that there's some risk in status quo as well, because as the program no doubt continues to grow, then you're going to see less and less of those dollars being dispersed.
And the current process is we set budget levels for the next year in our budget process, then the application process goes through.
They're actually concurrent. They use the recommended budget from me to start their application period with, to notify potential applicants.
So then what I'm wondering is there opportunity from our committees to inform us about what level of available funds best suits the program?
Yeah, they'll all tell you a lot more than what they have today. I just want to be transparent.
Sure.
That's definitely what would come back. But I'd also challenge the council to recognize you're not the primary funding source for most of these program areas, right? There's a dedicated tax for health and human services in our county. That should be a lead funder in health and human services. It's just the nature of it. We have the largest collection for arts and culture, and perhaps that's an area we need to be a lead in it. The community grants are related back to your community building goal, that it does a lot of work in that area. It's just an established program. Again, I feel like I have enough direction about what to do with the team and the steering committee. So if you have any other questions, happy to answer them. But otherwise, we're good on the staff direction.
I do have a couple follow-on questions. What is the consensus direction? Because I didn't get it, so I would love for you to recap that for me. And then subsequent to that, what are our next steps here? What's coming next?
Sure, there is not a consensus position. There is a majority-minority position here. I did not see the five
Well,
of you.
that's what I meant by that
Right.
majority. What's the majority position?
Right now, the majority position is lower amounts to more organizations is the majority position. So we're going to work with the steering committee to develop scenarios that uses that approach, but we are going to develop at least one alternative that shows narrow and deep, so that there can be comparative discussion for you all between the merits of those two approaches from the committee and what the committee recommends between the two of those approaches.
Okay, and what does that mean, develop alternatives? What, are we doing a study to come?
No, the committee will come through and say, well, if you reduce the max grant amount because you want to be able to give to lots of organizations, your 100,000 cap might be too high to be meaningful enough to continue offering awards of that amount with the existing award formula. They may say, well, tweak the award formula a certain way, as another example. So I think what we're going to have to go do is go back and develop probably 3 or 4 scenarios that get vetting by the steering committee of what do they like and dislike of those, or what's actually not feasible. I think they're a great test for feasibility, and come back to you. So I do want to make sure in our scenarios we provide the majority and the minority position that we're hearing here today. And then the timeline for all of this, I'll have to talk with the staff, because right now in the middle of a grant cycle. But we would want to see if we can get substantial progress in order to prepare applicants for the 2025 cycle of any changes you might choose to implement, whether that's funding levels or policy changes, which means we would be finishing this up in the early parts of third quarter.
Thanks. Ward, I think your comments were the most on the fence of any that I heard. So is
On the fence, could you tell me what you
well,
mean?
meaning you said the comments that I heard you make fell on both sides of whether to go narrow and deep or shallow and wide. So
Yeah, I think I made myself clear that I think I favor more organizations because there are a lot of smaller organizations that have a focus on something that wouldn't be covered. Like I'm looking at couple $100,000 grants. One got 23,000, the other one got 69,000. So I think that the committee work and the scoring system is working. But I thought I made myself clear that there are a lot of organizations that wouldn't fall under some of the larger ones, so that those that are focused on a niche that isn't being met, those are dedicated people that are putting a lot of work into it, and I think they deserve to be funded and at least considered. And I'm just afraid that if we just go narrow and deep, that those are going to be missed. So I'm definitely in the wide and shallow camp as a general philosophy.
Thank you for clarifying. I guess I really don't like those terms, narrow and deep and shallow and wide either. For me, the focus is give the committees the ultimate latitude to decide where the impact is necessary without a mandate saying you got to give money to everybody. That's the part of this I really don't like personally. Just because you apply, you're getting money. And your mandate may be irrelevant to Aspen in 2024, 2025, 2050. And that's what I don't like the status quo for. And the demand is only going to increase. So when you say, all you got to do is apply, you get some money from us, then all of a sudden people are going to be saying, we need $10,000 to have any kind of impact, and they're going to get $10. So I guess that would be my counter argument.
I think the committee structure and the scoring system is working. If you look at the amount of what the requests were and what the rewards were, when the same request is made and different rewards are granted, it tells you that the committee is doing its work and that they are weighing that.
I think on some of those bigger ones it's true, but on some of the smaller ones it's probably less true. And I think, as Patrick eloquently explained, this problem is going to get more severe over time. So again, I regret using the terms shallow and deep, or narrow and deep and shallow and wide. I think it's more, I just want to give the decision-making power to the committees.
And I think that they have that.
I did want to add one more thing about, I did hear majority direction on potentially expanding the arts and culture funding to those arts and culture grants, because I think there was a majority in increasing that. And I think that is a big deal since most of these funds come from the Arts and Culture Fund.
So could we go down the line and straw poll on that one, please? I just want to make sure I'm clear.
I'm interested in the conversation. I agree. I think I want to hear more individual takes from committee members, because I think that they're in it. They have a feeling about this. So I want to just send this back and say, hey, it's all on the table. I want to know what the different members are feeling. But mine's not just the arts and culture. I would be interested in, I don't have the base understanding of the nexus between dollars in and dollars out, and I'd want to empower them to be able to work in that realm. And so I am interested in raising the availability of funds in all these, not just the arts and culture myself. But I want information back about it. I don't want to just say that as a blanket statement without knowing what I'm talking about. So Ward and John, how do you feel about increasing funding availability?
Well, funding availability to arts and culture through the RED fund, Wheeler RED, I'm certainly open to that. And I think that, you look at the grants funding for arts and culture, the requests and the grants awarded, there's a big spread there in percentages, and I think that I think the committee is doing its work. I think they're separating the wheat from the chaff.
I support the direction that the current staffs are taking this.
About Arts and Culture Fund increasing?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so we'll ask the committee to consider, the steering committee to consider what that looks like. Again, you're going to have the conversation about big institutions and little institutions and their ability to measure their impact. Will be another consideration for you when we come back. So it sounds like we have some homework to do. Like I said, it probably is going to be early third quarter before we're back to you, since we're in the middle of a grant cycle right now that we need to focus on. But we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Thanks.
You know, and Sarah, thank you. I mean, where this has come over just the last couple of years and such is amazing. So thank you for leadership on this. It's getting better, not getting worse, that's for sure. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. Chris, good to see you. Judy, thank you for your work. Our next item up, guys, is an APCHA discussion that has percolated over the last couple months, and our representatives, Ward and John, want to hear a little bit from us about APCHA.
So council, we have some staff at the table. They are not presenting. They are only here for technical question support. So this is truly a conversation between the five of you. Thank you.
Well, the reason John and I wanted to bring this in front of council is that we want to have a broader discussion amongst the five of us as to what we present to APCHA. And I presented some challenges that are out there, and I want to first acknowledge, John, perhaps you can acknowledge the work that APCHA has done recently and where some of our successes are.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to miss something here, but let's see. As most of us, as I've reported in council comments before, the home repair pilot program has begun, and as it turns out, half of the funds available have been allocated. 58 applications came in, 34% of them were Category 3. Let's see, we're talking about expanding that program to Category 4 people so that we can invest in the long-term goal of life and longevity of all APCHA units. We have started the right-sizing program, and one right-sizing has occurred. Let's see, also we've been looking over our rules and regulations and enhanced some of them. Definition of a remote worker. We had a discussion about our current yearly hours worked. And last but not least, I'd like to point out that during our retreat last year, we decided that during our city council's affordable housing goals, our goal was 400 affordable housing units within the next 5 years. We have 82 units so far since then, so we are on track. And I look forward to working with the rest of you to deliver those 400 units over the next 4 years.
And with any program, you're not going to make all people happy. There are going to be issues that stand out that aren't being addressed, or there's some flaws that are in the program. We acknowledge some of those. We're trying to work on some of those, but I think identifying them and then seeing if they're really accurate and to what degree there is a problem. One of our goals for housing is to development neutral. And one way that we've been looking at that, and has been an issue for a number of years, but it's never really gotten much traction, is incentivizing the right sizing. And if you can gain bedrooms through an incentive program, you don't have to develop. So I think that although it's question number 4 on what I made available to you all, I think it perhaps is the biggest one that we can work on. And I don't know what the right number is, but anytime that you can gain bedrooms without having to build them, anytime you can be more efficient in the utilization of your assets, anytime that you can rewrite your deed restrictions to be more current, I think it's a gain for the whole workforce. If we can offer incentives for people to retire and get out of the system. If they want to, then perhaps that's something we should do. So maybe that's the first thing that we could get a temperature from the rest of from the council on, is a direction for us to be pushing APCHA and trying to prioritize what I would see is question number 4 that I emailed to you all, and I think was added to the packet late.
So for this meeting, Sarah, is it best serving our time for us just to kind of go through these and see if there is support for work being done to these ends? We're not going to create a program at the table right now.
No, and in a lot of cases, it won't be the council creating a program at all. It's really about providing your representatives to the APCHA board some clarity on the majority position of council so that they can fairly represent that for the city when it comes time to vote or influence policy decisions there. Just like if you're on the RAFTA board and you get input ahead of time. It's the same approach as any other one of those assignments.
Okay, so I'm going to start down this end. Question number 4 is basically just about that, buyout opportunity and right sizing and in potentially whole unit move out.
Thanks. Ward, thanks for bringing that up, and John, and thank you. Ward and John, thanks for bringing this up and for facilitating this conversation. As you know, I'm super supportive of this concept. I want to make sure it's clear to everybody that I believe this concept should certainly extend to people leaving the deed-restricted housing program, in addition to people right-sizing and switching from one unit size to another. I think they're both critical elements to this program that help to achieve the goals of development-neutral unit expansion, or at least, freeing up some units. And on that note, Matthew and Liz, I think it would be very helpful to help understand the need on this one a little more quantitatively. And I see the biggest need, the biggest opportunity for those to be able to free up bedrooms. This is certainly not a catch-all, but I think the generalization is retirees, which as we all know is a current and impending issue in our housing program. So could we have some updated data on I know I've seen some 2021 data. I have not seen anything more current on how many retirees we have in owned deed-restricted housing. How many of them are working part-time versus full-time. If it's possible to get household size comparisons to unit size, that would be really valuable to bring this conversation home. And what I mean by that is establish what the dollar incentive will be per bedroom. If we get to a majority consensus on the idea of this, I think that will be really the big question, is how much do we pay? In my eyes, it's understanding how big the opportunity is will really help us determine a strategy on how much we pay.
It's important for us to understand that we, as a city council, have one vote on the APCHA board. So what we're really looking for now is the voice that we bring to the APCHA board to direct staff. We can't, as one vote, sit here and tell APCHA staff what to do, but we can, at one vote, come to APCHA and try to, if this is really a high priority, make this a high priority for the city council as a representative on the APCHA board, to try to task staff with these questions that you're asking.
Well, I agree with you that we have one vote on the APCHA board. I disagree with you that we can't request information from our staff, which is City of Aspen staff, to be clear, to help facilitate that conversation and that argument, both for our board and for the APCHA board. Could you, Ward and John, explain some of your bullet points under this question? What do you mean by a challenge is moving family from one project to another? A challenge, sale price of each involved unit, please.
I think what I'm looking at is direction, not so much how we craft the program, but I mean, the challenges are that if you have to requalify when you sell a unit and buy a new unit, what the sell price is, if you're creating a situation for somebody that has retired, owns a unit, doesn't have a mortgage, has to requalify, move into a unit that they'd have to get a mortgage. Those are type of challenges that we have to look at. Additionally, somebody that's retired obviously is older, and the physical strain and stress of actually moving from one place to another is, if it's not even in the same project, but moving within the system can be quite a challenge. So these are concerns. I think that is a challenge to be considered.
Thanks. Yeah, certainly agree. There's challenges that come across with, come along with this, and that's part of the idea of incentivizing it financially, is to cover some of those costs, to make up for some of the compromises and the sacrifices, so.
And Bill, I think it's important that you verbalize this so we can acknowledge that these are challenges and how we direct staff to address those challenges that you're identifying.
Yeah, agree. All right, well, to summarize, super supportive of this, want to make sure that it's not presented as just swap of units, but also, you know, a voluntary sale of your unit for some period of time. This is not a perpetual program in my mind. I think it should come out as a pilot program, and we can evaluate how it works, and the APCHA board can evaluate how it works, and there should be a fixed amount of money designated towards it, in my eyes. But I do think it's important for everyone's consideration that the idea here is not that this is something that's set in stone forever, and that, you know, it's not an increased sales price forever on your unit effectively. It's a reward for freeing up bedrooms and units that we need now.
And would you be supportive of dedicating 150 funds to help fund this program?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. On this item?
Yeah, same with me. I want to be clear, nobody's being forced out of their home. This is an incentive program, not a forced removal. And I see it as a win-win-win. It's a win for the buyer, because whoever buys the new property gets to move into an upsized home, hopefully for them and their family. Win for the seller, they get more money on the sale and can do what they want with it. Maybe they can stay in the community, or maybe they leave. That's their choice. And it's a win for the community. More bedrooms are being occupied. It helps our workforce and helps people stay in the community. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I think the question is just how much. And you might need to hire an actuary for that, but they'll know.
How much of an incentive, or how
Yeah.
big the program?
No, how much of an incentive? I mean, a pilot program makes sense for me to start, but I do hope it expands. And I guess the last comment on it is we weren't ready for BG3, but maybe when the lumberyard comes along, it could be the great right sizing of Aspen, where people can like move into the lumberyard and people can move into those other APCHA ownership units all over town, and you watch like town bedrooms fill up like crazy in a really positive way.
I'm supportive. I want to see more information.
Obviously, I'm highly supportive, and just to reassure the rest of council, I mean, our right-sizing program we're going to be tweaking it as it goes along. Our home repair program has gone through several tweaks already, so none of this is set in stone, but this is a very good starting point. Thanks.
Yeah, we haven't sung our praises on the home repair program so much yet, but any amount of money that is granted towards home repairs really goes to increase in longevity and the quality of the asset that stays in the program. Let's go to question number 1. There have been some questions, it's been raised if an AMI is the right thing to be using as a measuring stick, and with a lack of any better rubric or tool, we're kind of stuck with using the AMI, engaging you know, the rentals, I supplied what the maximum rental rates are in the document I provided from APCHA, but APCHA only controls so many of the rental units. Most of them are controlled by private property managers, and if we, I guess from a policy standpoint, what I'm looking at is equity for rental rates throughout the categories and throughout the system, so that if you look at the heat map, some people in some scenarios could be paying as little as 12% of their AMI for their housing. And some other people on the other end can be paying 43%. And I'm looking at if there is interest in the council to look at some kind of program where we would set a something, 30% is agreed upon throughout, I think, as housing burden. So set something like maybe 28% of.
Yeah, 28 or a little less if possible.
Yeah, or less as a rate that you're paying for your housing, because if you look at this heat map that I think Chris Everson and Liz, or I don't know who developed this, but it's a tremendous amount of data here. Diane.
Sorry, it was EPS did that work as part of the lumberyard, and it's been presented to council in the past.
Yeah, but it shows that there's not equity in the system, and I'm curious how the rest of the council feels about making it so that everybody's paying roughly the same percentage of their AMI for rent to equalize it throughout the income category. I recently attended last week the Western Mountain Housing Forum, and the biggest demand is for the lowest paying jobs in the community. The food services and guest services is the highest demand, yet the lowest paying. So to keep an economy going, those people have to be able to afford to live here somehow. And if you look at this heat map, they're paying the highest percentage. So there seems to be a gap in the equity of this. And so trying to bring this to the attention of the council and see, as a sounding board, see how you feel about this.
I think, does this also incorporate the conversation about those that are at the low end of a category versus those that are at the high end of a category? Okay. So again, in general terms, we're just looking for direction. They're gonna need to go to their board. They're gonna need to work with APCHA and the board in order to get some of this work going. So really the question is, are you supportive of some kind of truing up or different methodology for rental rates?
Yes, and I appreciate the question. I think that it is an issue. I think the most glaring issue is what Ward and John noted here, is that between Category 3 and Category 4, there's a range of 74% of AMI. So people with very different financial pictures are paying marginally different rents. So that clearly highlights the issue. Now, I think it's worth mentioning, although I'm supportive of the work on this, I think there's some pretty enormous barriers to implementing this. One is that APCHA does not own many of these rental units. What percentage roughly of all deed restricted rental units does APCHA own or manage?
Yeah, a few.
Very, like 10%?
No.
Lower than that, right.
Well,
So
there's,
it's like,
there's 1,300, I just want to check the math on that. It's higher than what I'm hearing here. Okay, it is just 10%. The city, so how many rentals are in the inventory?
I think aren't there 135, gosh, I just saw this data the other day, like 135 rental units that the city controls, and then they're roughly 1,300.
Okay, I was thinking the city's units were a higher count than that.
We can double check.
Oh, I had Merrill in there. That's not what we're talking about, though.
Bill, I certainly
Sarah, you might be
acknowledge
right.
what
It
you're
might be
saying is that
230.
from the feedback I get from staff, from APCHA and from Diane is it's an administrative nightmare but if
That
we.
was point two.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a challenge, but what I'm looking at is if there's support for trying to find a balance so that the rent, I mean, you look at what the maximum rent is on a 3-bedroom in a different category, and how do you make it so that the person that is renting out Castle Ridge or somebody else, a private owner, is not going to be taking a hit, so that they still get the same amount of rent, but the renter isn't paying 38% of their income for their rent, where somebody else is paying, so that the amount that is being paid is actually the same, and how it gets to the recipient may have to be tweaked. And I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, again, I think it's interesting to explore at a high level. I think it's really challenging. You know, it also begs the question of should sales prices of ownership units be pegged to income in a certain way? You know, we have a bigger ownership program currently than we do a rental program. That's something that we could effectuate pretty quickly and somewhat across the board compared to rental. So anyway, I'm certainly open to exploring it, interested in learning if there's some other methodology that might move us closer towards the goal on here. It doesn't sound like, to me, like we're ever gonna be able to say everyone pays 28% of income as rent. I think that, like you said, is an administrative nightmare. But I'm interested in exploring, is there a better way to do it than what we have been doing?
Just a quick interruption, I apologize, but as you can see, our Zoom link is down. There's an issue with the with the internet provider service into the building at the moment, but you are still, there's a different dedicated line for the filming, so the YouTube link is live, but just in case you get feedback or however you wish to conduct your meeting, just know that those other venues
Still
for
being
broadcasting
recorded?
is still being recorded. So my apologies, we're trying to track down what's going on.
As long as we're still on TV.
Okay, Bill, thank you for that. Sam?
Yeah, I gotta agree that this is a very difficult one to actually implement change on. I kind of wonder, as far as like, if you can get rid of the categories altogether and just have a spectrum of rental. I don't know. I think the categories, like, I understand why there's like cliffs between like a dollar amount sometimes, and it could just be a wide open spectrum that is based off of income. And I think the only perverse incentive there is what people do already, which is hiding income in the cash economy sometimes. But otherwise, it makes a lot more sense to me that it's just from 0 to infinity and a spectrum.
I'd just respond briefly. I had a discussion with some people at the Housing Forum that they want to do away with AMIs entirely. And we've had some discussions about doing away with categories, but there's some things that are tied to categories, but they can be adjusted, like housing mitigation can be tied to categories, but yeah,
All I know is when some people are paying 9.4% of their income and other people are paying 43.8% of their income, that's not equitable. And we need to find a better solution than that.
Sam, other comments on this item?
No.
if you figure out how to do this, I think there'd be a
Yeah,
lot of
no,
happy people.
I mean, the other one was easier to talk about. This one's really difficult.
Well, I'm very interested in this. I think there might be opportunities for maybe creating, instead of getting rid of categories, maybe creating more that, lets people fall into a narrower category, kind of like your spectrum. It would be chopped up better than just the 5 categories that we have now. So I am interested in this for that equity piece that you spoke to. I really think that we need to do that. I also am interested in this because it makes me wonder if there is opportunity here, for example, for lumberyard and the pro forma that's going to be developed out there. We might have the opportunity for more revenue capture that's still fair and equitable for the tenants and the residents. But I think it's potential that redefining this could have positive impact for bottom line going forward with projects.
Yeah, I'll point out that I was gonna bring that question forward about cell units, but I figured we had till phase 3, we had some more time in phase 3 of the lumberyard where that'll really become salient. But I think it's been brought to my attention, there's a huge gap between category 4 and category 5 for sale units, perhaps even larger than there is in the rental between 3 and 4. So there are some areas to be tweaked when we get to the sale units, but I'd like to bring that back. And what I'd like to be able to do is have these work session items maybe quarterly, or at least every 6 months, so we can get some direction from the rest of the council and make sure that we're marching to the same drummer.
There is support for this next item.
This one, in this question number 2, there've been some tweaks done to the program that have addressed this already. What happens if you look at your categories, your maximum minimum incomes, it's very possible that somebody can get a raise, they get a promotion, they make more money, and then they're incomed out. They're no longer in the category. I had some people last year that they were a ski patrol and they got an increase, and then they thought they were going to lose their housing. But I'd like Matthew and maybe Liz to address this, because I think that where it was a larger concern, that it is not as much of a concern now.
We were seeing problems with that, particularly last year, due to the inflationary pressure we had seen in the past couple of years, which we hadn't seen before. AMI, the number set, tends to lag behind the actual CPI number. So anecdotally, we haven't seen too many problems with this, and the APCHA board did take measures, a temporary increase up to 150% last year. So I'd like to do a little bit of research to see what the problem is. People who do earn more than the income in their band, in their category, they do have a year to either to find somewhere else, or probably not make less money, but they do have a year. Nobody's being kicked out immediately. The rental market, the private rental market in the valley does still exist. So I don't think this is as big an issue as it was about a year ago, and it definitely was a problem, but I'm going to go back with staff and just double check and get some real data on that and discuss that.
So what I guess I'm asking the rest of the council is direction from this table to staff to keep an eye on it and to report how that's changing from year to year. Because we don't want people to be disincentivized from getting a promotion or increase in pay.
Yeah, so again, appreciate the notion and agree with the notion generally. Or agree with the notion entirely. We want to incentivize people to try to make more money. Same sort of issue as with number 1 is like, this is a really hard thing to apply retroactively. Maybe the lumberyard is the only opportunity to do something like this where maybe there's some formula of, instead of saying that unit 301 is a category 2 and unit 302 is a category 4, maybe there's some way where there's some malleability in it, and you have to achieve a certain blend of categories across the whole project. It's a great question. I think it's something that maybe is more valuable as a looking forward on new rental units than it is on something we can do. We can really effectuate any change on existing ones, but supportive of the issue, or of exploring a solution to the issue or an improvement to the issue. Thanks.
Sam, any input?
Yeah, the options you listed, I would generally agree with. But more than anything, whatever the solution is, people should not be disincentivized from making more money or fear they're going to lose their housing because of it. That's almost like, it's a very cruel punishment, honestly, when it's like good for people to do that for themselves and their family. So whatever options you list helps to do that, that'd be the direction I would give.
Yeah, those are options that came to our minds, but staff might have other ideas. But if we have a policy that we don't want this to happen, and how can we prevent it, and let the staff come up with ways to do that.
Well, and I guess the other part was back to one, is like the categories can be very limiting. I don't know how many empty bedrooms we have in the rental selection because of the categories and people not being able to fill category ones. I've heard that before. I don't want to say.
Oh, no, that's true, and it's because they're LIHTC, they're low income, and so those are tied to your lowest income people in the community, and you can't rent them. They sit vacant if you can't find people that qualify, and the economy is such here that people are making more than that.
And that's the point, is like, I think that's where it's like becomes ridiculous in the rental side of things, that we have these categories and limitations that do the opposite of what we're intending. So loosening up the categories or loosening up something else to fill these units and to not have people fear that they're making more money and losing them. That's the goal I would have in mind, because I feel like you're just looking for that direction versus I don't have the solution necessarily yet.
Diane, could you give us a little context as to why some of these units are built with LIHTC funding and how we're locked into them until they're paid off? And
Yeah, so the Colorado State Housing Finance Agency provides what they're called LIHTC, low-income tax credit, for builders. And some of, Truscott, one of the Truscott buildings, I forget which one, is a LIHTC property. And the issue is these incomes are so low, and APCHA staff has on multiple occasions, as well as worked with finance on this, to go to CHAFA and say, can we buy these out? Can we increase, have the conversation about AMI? And the answer has always been no. So, APCHA has been going to extreme lengths to advertise these in amongst different populations. I think the policy change that Matthew and staff brought to the board December 19th, I think it was, that follows Colorado's law about you don't have to prove documentation status. That may help. But Matthew, you've still got units.
Yeah, it's not as bad as it was. We've done a very good job advertising, but it's generally 60% of AMI. So that's really one working adult in a lower wage job. So as soon as you get two working adults, it doesn't work. It's definitely still an issue, and we work very hard to advertise those units in English and Spanish up and down the valley. And it's not as bad as it was, but we're still working on it.
We should maybe advertise them with job postings that we see on Indeed that would maybe meet those LIHTC requirements. I mean, that's a good way to find them, but they should be filled.
yeah, to have rental units sitting out there not occupied is maddening.
It is, yeah. So I think there are ways to fill them. It sounds like you're doing a better job, and like I just said, like if there's a job that looks like it's posted online, and be like, reach out to the employer and say, hey, we might have housing for you because your person might meet this requirement.
I'm supportive of looking into this. I think it is a bigger problem than we know. And the reason I think that is because it is something that people do not talk about for fear of losing their housing. So I think that something needs to be accommodating for this, but I also agree that some attention on these category ones and what's our take and what's our program for making sure that we're utilizing the housing that we've got built. And who is the governing body that we have to petition to?
That would be the federal government. So it ultimately comes down from HUD, and they are not receptive. We've approached this from multiple angles, multiple ways, multiple slight rewriting of the question, and
Yeah,
it's not
all
going
right.
But we don't have a lot of LIHTC units. This is a small number of units.
right. Very small.
Yeah.
And just FYI, state of Colorado has different AMIs for different counties, and so what I provided here is just the Pickens County, but those cost of living is adjusted by the counties, so that 100% of AMI in Pitkin is different than 100% in Mesa or some other county.
This is, can I add one thing here, Ward? This is a problem, and this just occurred to me real time, but this is a problem that I think is going to become exacerbated very quickly. Venmo and PayPal and those sorts of cash apps are going to be required to report income over $600 per person starting next year, I think. And my suspicion is that some people are being paid that way and are not reporting that on their tax returns. So I think we're going to see a spike in people who are earning out of their categories pretty soon. I don't know if that's a 24 tax reporting change or it was. I know it's been delayed several times, but I would expect that exacerbates this issue. So it's a very timely point.
I'll just share with you something that I found kind of amazing, is that the numbers, it seems like some people keep two sets of books. They present one set of numbers to APCHA, and then when they go to get a loan, they present another set of numbers to get their loans. And that APCHA and the banks are coordinating now, so that is, I think, going away. Am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, we're very against two sets of books. You know, you get one set of books, that's the set of books you submit with your taxes. We're working on ways to make sure we get better access to the tax transcript rather than the self-reported tax return. So we're trying to tighten that up just to make sure nobody is submitting false documents, yeah.
I'm just going to toss this up because it just blew me away. At the housing forum, there was somebody from the state, Carolyn Tucker, presented a question for the group at the beginning of her talk. She said, a single parent in Garfield County, in Glenwood Springs, with 3 children, what is a livable wage for a single parent with 3 children in Glenwood Springs?
I know this one.
The answer is 147,000 plus. $147,520, I think, is a livable. Gives an idea of what the scale is and how much you have to make to support a family. So that was really surprising to me. My guess is 65K, and I was so far off. But yeah, that's.
Yeah, I would think, wouldn't living wage not be definition for bare minimum, or living wage is like living comfortably?
Maybe Carol could get that answer better than I can. It's a state number.
Wow.
I thank you for all of this. And the last one that I wanted to question number 3, it's come to me before, and I think all of you have probably heard this before too, and it's the minimum, the age for the federal government for a dependent college student is 24, is that right? And it's 19 for APCHA, is that right? And what's happening is some longtime rental families that have been in the community for extended period of time, they have kids that are growing up, they're going to college, and as they're 19, reach 19, they're going away for maybe 9 months to go to college, and when they lose, because they're 19 and they're not a full-time working resident, they lose credit towards the minimum number of people in a unit. So that creates housing instability, because if a family had a 3-bedroom and now they don't qualify, they have to move to a 2-bedroom, there's no guarantee that there's a 2-bedroom rental available. So I don't know what we can do about it, but I wanted to bring it up to see.
It's a great point. I heard about one specific instance today that I wasn't aware of. I don't know how big of an issue it is. I don't know how many households in rental housing there are that have college-age kids that are facing this issue or not. But one idea crossed my mind, and I guess the question relating to the idea is, are sublets to qualified tenants permitted in rental housing?
No.
So that I don't know if we could tweak that or not, but if a 19-year-old member of a family goes away to college and is gone for 9 months of the year, you know, could you put a subtenant in that person's bedroom for some period of that time, and therefore, you know, remove that instability? Obviously, there's a compromise there because you're living with maybe someone who's not related to you, but maybe it's a step in the right direction. That's the one idea that crossed my mind today.
Yeah, I mean, that was a specific idea. I would just say allowing nuance, because this is a very nuanced problem, so I feel like it needs a very nuanced solution. And then when it comes to these rentals, one thing I've discovered, we talk about bedrooms a lot, but I think square footage matters in the sense of like how on top of each other people are. So that's something I would consider when I think of like a nuanced plan for how to deal with this. Because if we're talking about a 3-bedroom that's like 800 square feet, that bedroom might be not terribly big and not terribly appealing for a subtenant to move into, versus a 2-bedroom that's 800 plus square feet and the bedrooms don't touch, and that might be better for people.
Perhaps Sarah or Diane could chime in on this, but I think since BG1, perhaps it was at BG2, that all of the categories were the same size and same finish. Is that true? So it category 2 and category 4 are the same size. Is that right?
By development, perhaps we're close. I would say across the inventory, that is not a consistent status. You'll have a category 2 2-bedroom that's 1,000 square feet, and you'll have a category 2 2-bedroom that's 650, 700 square feet, probably 700. 650 is a little small for that.
Yeah, I thought that we moved towards making the same size as somewhere around BG2.
While there's a desire, what happened was a change, and I believe that's when the change happened in the minimum floor area requirements for certain units, of which several exemptions have been given to those, or waivers have been given to those minimums.
Going back to this thing about family situations changing, APCHA changed from 24 to 19. Do you support seeing if APCHA has the support for going back up to 24, or what is? Because is 24 the federal standard for?
For a dependent, I don't
Yeah.
think so. I'm not sure what it is, but
I know
I
it's
think
more
that
than
was-
19.
right, but I don't think it's particularly tied to the federal definition of a dependent or based on your taxes. And it was changed just 2.5 years ago, and that was an attempt to squeeze, more bang for buck out of the units by making sure, that was the intention, to get more bang for buck out of the units and get more leverage there.
So if we could maybe get a feel for how many people are actually affected by this.
Yeah.
Go from there.
Makes sense.
It begs bringing up the conversation that there's so many restrictions that apply to rental and not to ownership. And it's so, such a different experience living in APCHA rental housing versus APCHA ownership housing. And I think we always need to keep that top of mind as we continue to either develop or fund or create new rules and policies around this. I believe that we should try to converge those experiences as closely as possible.
Yeah, we've heard that being brought forward. And one of the arguments that I've heard, or one of the reactions that I've heard, is that rental and ownership are really different animals, and that there is a path for people that feel more restricted in rentals, perhaps are making more money, that there is the lottery system. There are units coming up for sale, and that there are people that have moved from rental to ownership. But I think that, I've heard the same, that some of the challenges that are presented to rentals aren't there for ownership. And I don't know, let's have that as a future topic to.
Yeah, I think, again, like I said, it's something that always to keep in mind, because I think it's narrow-minded, I'm not accusing you of being narrow-minded, but the notion that the opportunity exists to buy a unit doesn't apply to everybody. There are people that are never going to be able to qualify for a mortgage. There are people that are just never going to be able to get it together to get a mortgage. There's a variety of other limiting factors for why someone may stay in rental housing perpetually. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that that's bad for their family situation, doesn't mean it's bad for our community. And I don't think that we should treat them as a second class of citizens in Aspen as compared to people who live in ownership. And so I think that it's important to say that, and it's important to keep it top of mind, that we should try to converge those experiences and try to treat each group, both renters and owners, similarly.
I'd just like to respond to that. There've been voices in the community that all of the APCHA programs should be rentals only. And others that say that you need to have long-term community that can be only delivered through ownership units. And then there also the desire throughout the program, I think, to utilization and to do away with people that are perhaps cheating the system. So if you're a rental and you have to requalify every 2 years, that's a way of making sure that you don't have people cheating the system. But once you're in on an ownership. So that's a built-in, I mean, you have these requalifications to meet the demands in the community, that there aren't people that are cheating the system. So I guess you can't have a perfect program.
No, and we're making strides to improve the requalifications, even in ownership, which is good, and that, I think those efforts should continue. But again, I think just important for all of us collectively to keep in mind that the way the programs work right now are pretty disparate in the experience of those tenants and owners, and I would like them personally to be less disparate.
I want to bring up one more thing that it's not on the list here. We've brought it up, both John and I have brought it up at APCHA in the past, and it came up at the Western Housing Regional Forum, the one that has too many words in it. And that's a question of what's a full-time worker. And we have 1,500 hours as a full-time employment. Snowmass Village and a lot of other communities have gone to 1,400 hours. And there are reasons why 1,400 hours seems to be a better fit for a resort community where you have some off seasons. And so I'd like just a feedback from our council as to if we want to have further discussions about decreasing, the city of Aspen asking APCHA to decrease from 1,500 to 1,400 as a full-time employee.
I can't open the calculator on here. What does it translate to in hours per week? 1,500 right now.
It's 37 and a half weeks.
37 and a half hours per week?
No, 37 and a half weeks worked of the year, or 72%.
How many hours? So what's 1,500?
It's about 32 hours a week.
Maybe I can help you out. Vail's requirement is 1,560 hours per year, which works out to 30 hours per week at 52 weeks per year.
Sam just did it, 28.9. I'm not supportive of changing the 1,500.
Yeah, for the same reasons, I don't think it's needed. It seems, I understand the resort community side and the seasonal aspect, but it seems low enough already.
I totally disagree. I think that 1,400 would be where we'd need to sit. I've been talking to a lot of people in our community about this recently, and it's not easy for a lot of our seasonal jobs to maintain 1,500. Here's the way I look at it is 1,500 hours a year breaks down to 30 hours for 50 weeks a year. I personally am not asking anybody to work 50 weeks out of a year. And the reason I say 30 hours is because if you look at some of your employment opportunities around here, they don't get 40 hours a week. They're not. You know, you talk about anybody that works in a hotel is seeing several months, 8 weeks a year out of, at least 8 weeks a year out of their position in a lot of cases of the service industry positions. I am not really looking to make it so that only people that work 40 hours a week are eligible for our housing program. And I find 1,500 to just be a little demanding given the lifestyle and the job market that is around here. I highly support looking at lowering that just to 1,400. I mean, really not a big impact. You're not really going to be, you know, lessening your workforce through this measure. But I think really you have people that are struggling for compliance just because of the nature of their jobs. So I really do. I think that for our community's best interest, I think that we should be lowering that to 1,400 hours.
I think it's worth a discussion.
I mean, the difference is 14 and a half weeks off at a standard 40-hour week versus 17 weeks off of a standard 40-hour week. I don't know. We talk about trying to fill our bedrooms and try to have like workers and such. I just don't think I think it's already low enough. 14 and a half weeks off a year.
You know what? That's not what it's about. It's not about people that work 40 hours a week. We have a service industry community that is based off of different dynamics. Ski instructors sometimes will show up to work and not get a lesson, so they don't get hours credit for that day. In days that ski instructors do work, sometimes they get 6 hours of credit for that day of work. You know, times are different. When I moved here 30 years ago, I was working 2 jobs, 4 days a week. You know, I was pulling 8 shifts just to make ends meet. Those times are different. That's not what people are getting paid anymore. That's not the expectation. And I personally, like I said, you know, I look at this housing as not just workforce, but it is community supportive housing. And I feel like right now we're putting a lot of the people that rely on this housing and the employers that rely on this housing for their workforce, we're putting them in a non-compliant kind of status. And again, the 100 hours is not going to really change the dynamic there, but I do think that it would make this housing program a little bit more community accommodating. I just know a lot of people, you know, again, my experience, and I've lived in a lot of different housing situations, and just the people that I know are, you know, they want to be available to work with a seasonal job. This is why they're here. But they take time off. Not everybody works 40 hours a week. Some people work a lot more.
I'd say most people have multiple jobs.
Torre, do volunteer hours count towards a 1,500 hour?
They do not. And so this is the next phase of this is like, you know, I think students have the opportunity to look for a reduction, but there's different things that happen in people's lives. So I would say the same thing. Volunteer hours could count towards a 1,500 or 1,400. And there's a couple other ideas there, but
I'd look at it from that angle, that some number of volunteer hours could count towards the limit. You know, if there is a significant portion of the population that can earn enough in 1,400 hours that can't do it in 1,500 hours, then I'd be supportive of don't take an extra 2 weeks of vacation and spend 2 weeks volunteering in your community. That's something I'm supportive of.
I'd like to toss this up because I haven't seen the slide deck from the meeting. Was it Thursday or Friday that we're supposed to get this? But one thing that really struck me was that, you know, what drives our economy? And I think that we would generally agree that it's a tourism. I mean, there are a lot of others, but tourism is a driver of the economy, and who fills the jobs that keep that economy going are really low-paid employees. You know, they're the lodging community and food services are on the low end, and but the highest number. So what I would suggest is that I come back to the council with the justifications that, that Western Housing has come up with for 1,400. Snowmass Village has come up for 1,400. And, give you some more data points. I'm kind of on the fence here. I supported 1,500. We've brought 1,400 to APCHA without a lot of support for it. But I'd like to have a more robust conversation about this. And if some of those numbers from that meeting, that forum, could help inform us, I'd like to come back to council with that.
I'd appreciate that.
That's all I had.
I have one more thing that came up when I was preparing for this, if I could. I think this is really for Sarah and Matthew, but I was reviewing the intergovernmental agreement, the APCHA intergovernmental agreement, and under the section relating to the executive director, there's about 8 responsibilities, and 2 of them stuck out to me as things that I'm not sure I have, I'm not sure are being accomplished to the level that I would like to see them accomplished to. And those are specifically items E and G. And without reading them out loud, one talks about establishing a computerized rental availability record system. That's E. And G talks about investigating and maintaining data indicating housing needs within the city or county. You know, E, I know there's some arguments of how difficult that, and totally understandable arguments of how difficult that can be to accomplish, because as we talked about earlier tonight, the city only really controls about 10% of the rental inventory, and how do you get owners of rental housing to participate in that program and provide their data? It's complex, I get that. G to me is much more pressing, is I refuse to operate under the premise that we just need more housing, period, full stop. And that doesn't mean I deny the fact that we need more housing. That means I want to know specifically what types of housing we need, for whom, how much, what solves the problem, where's the end game. I don't have that data, and Matthew, please don't take this as a personal assault that you're not doing a good job. That's not what I mean by this. I noticed those things, and I wanted to bring them up so that we can get more of that information out here. So apologies if I came off as attacking. That's not how I mean this at all. I just wanted to bring it up because I do think that it's in there for a reason, and it's very important to me personally. So I wanted to bring that up and see if others feel the same way.
Bill, let me just add some data to that. I attended I think it was a CML Colorado Municipal League preview of the legislative session, and I think CAST is also looking at this. Last year, there were bills that would require counties to come up with these studies as part of a House or Senate bills, and that's part of what our legislative agenda is to keep an eye on that. So and then there was a question about mandates in these housing bills that I think most of our resort communities didn't want to have mandates on them, and so those mandates might be going away. But I think a part of all of the bills that I've seen that may be coming up this session require some kind of a housing needs study. And maybe Sarah or Matthew or other people can fill in the gaps on that. But it's the beginning of the legislative session. But that wouldn't be until 2025 probably that kind of requirement would be needed.
I appreciate the color on the state level. You know, I'm looking at this from a local standpoint, so I ask the others, are you supportive of having staff do more housing needs studies, more concrete, more specific, you know, who's living in our current housing program? is the need fulfilled? Do we, who do we need more housing for? What types of jobs? What types of income levels? I've never seen anything that granular produced in our community.
Matthew, can you give us a feel on how the home track reports are contributing to that information?
So before he jumps in on Home Trek, I'd like to answer the question more broadly and say, yes, this work has been getting done. There's two specific examples I can give to you is APCHA participated in the regional housing study from 2018, which predates that IGA, is my recollection, or is right around the same time. And then secondly, APCHA was a critical partner when the style and the mix of unit categories and the drivability was contemplated for Burlingame 3. So this has been ongoing work that APCHA has been at the table with. So it doesn't necessarily result in reports every time, but it has been used by the sitting council at this table regularly to inform decisions on the advancement of additional housing inventory construction. And at some point, if the council wishes to pursue free market buy down through the 150 fund, it will be used to advise you in that regard as well. And then Matthew, if you want to answer anything about the, so I hear you. It might not be the format that you're looking for it in, but it has been a consistent process that APCHA's been at the table for.
And I think with Home Track, it's used principally for qualifications to assess the viability of the applicant for the program based on their qualification packet. So that isn't really, it's not really a database of everybody who's in APCHA housing. We're using it for specific purposes. But as Sarah said, we could contribute very robustly to the overall efforts of the city for development.
Yeah, my points had nothing to do with Home Track.
Yeah.
You know,
It just said database size.
You know, I do not feel, based on anything that I've seen, and I'm happy to be corrected if there's something I've not come across, but I do not feel that we have done a good job as a community in establishing concretely what our housing needs are and for whom. And when I say housing needs, I mean both subsidized housing and is there some component of free market housing that might help improve our housing situation. I think that's a small piece of it, but not a piece to be ignored. I would really benefit in my decision-making role here from understanding really concretely how many housing units we need and of what types and for whom. And I don't think we've done that. We've been, I think as a governing body historically in my observance, since I've lived in Aspen, City Council has operated under the premise of more housing now without a lot of data behind it. And we're going to develop at all costs and we're going to do whatever we can at all costs. And again, this doesn't mean that I'm not supportive of more housing, to be clear. That's not my message that I'm sending at all. I just want to make sure we're doing the right kind of housing work for the right people who actually need it.
I can't lend my support in direction for that right now, just because I don't know what else is on that list. E and G, I don't know A, B, C, D.
Well, the point of
okay,
talking specifically about that was just to bring up the conversation.
It's okay. I agree with you. Hey, getting more of that data is something that we'd love. I think councils for decades have been operating under the goal that was set years ago that stated 65% of the workforce housed within the UGB. So I think we've been working off of a goal, and I'm supportive of what you're trying to get to. I'm not gonna right now to say, Matthew, start this work is not where I'm at, but to understand how we can get around that work, I'm all for. I think the conversation is not a precise science, right? I think different people will have different opinions about where that goal number should be set, including who, not just the total number, but who. But I think we've done, when we were doing some decision-making around lumberyard, for example, we had a lot of information coming from the demand side, right? our numbers of who's applying for what and all that kind of stuff. So trying to get some other information, some data information from maybe the business community or the larger employers and stuff, I'm all for it.
For me, it would ideally be from a neutral third party, because I think that there's a lot of bias that comes along with the demand side.
Well, I'm interested in kind of the conversation that you're at. I don't know how to get to it, and I don't feel the capability to say, hey, let's start that work right now. But I'd be interested in a work session that talks to that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it would be really valuable to have some kind of guiding data that says, we need, we recommend that you build 70% rental housing and 30% ownership housing for the next 10 years. And this is what your goal of the number of units should be. That's just one example of many criteria that I think you could fill, but what comes to mind, and to be clear, the 70-30 split is just made up numbers. There's nothing behind that.
I'm trying to think, what, from that regional housing study, did they do a number based on our valley?
So it gets a little more detailed than the Valley, and we will provide that report so it's fresh for all of you electronically. It's also anyone in the community, if you just search, it's on the APCHA website. So it has, for example, the difference in wage and salary, employment, and seasonality by town. Like I can compare Basalt to Carbondale to Aspen. It also has in there the job growth from 2001 through 2017, and what's broken down by sector and by wage changes in those sectors. So it's very rich, the work that EPS did at that time. And I mean, I still refer to it. I don't know about you all. I use this report pretty regularly. But it's a fair question to say that the last picture of data in here was pre-COVID in 2017. And this is definitely a report like this is a regional effort. Eagle County needs to be at the table, Garfield Housing Authority, ideally, at least the city of Glenwood Springs. I would not do this study independent of those partners who understand much better the nuances of what's happened in their areas than as we know the nuances here in Aspen. So certainly open to that conversation, but in terms of the performance of duties that for APCHA under the executive director, I do think that the executive director has been performing these duties.
I'd just like to weigh in on your comments. Bill, I know that during discussions and formulations and concept for the lumberyard, we had a number of public feedbacks. We started at a position where we wanted to have a lot of studios. We thought that's what the people wanted, and through public outreach, we realized that people don't want studios. They don't want a co-living, and so the lumberyard design morphed as it went along, and we got more community feedback. And I think we still missed the mark perhaps on some of the mixes as evidenced by the 3-bedroom category 5s. And as far as just some feedback on who are we building for, I think who we build for a lot depends on what category they are. A category 1 and a category 2 is a different type of person. Their employment's going to be a lot different than a category 5. So your middle management is coming from your 4 and 5s and ROs, whereas the biggest demand and what keeps the tourist economy going is from the lower wage scales. So the number of units the mix determines who it's for, so you can extrapolate from category 1s and 2s what kind of employee is going to be living in 1s and 2 based on what their salary is. And I think the Western Mountain Housing Coalition, or whatever it is, that study is rich, and it is from 2018 or 17.
It was issued in 19, actually.
Okay, it was issued in 19, but it's full of data, and it's pretty granular, and it was not, I would say it was not influenced by government because it wasn't a government study. It was an independent study. So, Sarah, I have it on I can send it to you. Sarah can to take a look at that regional study. And there's some interesting things in there about people that live in Aspen, or that work in Aspen, probably don't want to live here. And so that the demographics are changing. Some people that are living down valley don't want to come up here. And that's changing where your projected employment base is going to be. If people can get the same amount of money, revenue working mid-valley or down valley, they're not going to be coming up here. And what's going to happen is we're going to have a shortage of workers in the low wage scale in the things that actually drive our economy, and lodging and in food services, where the pay is low and the number is high. So those are trends that we really have to keep an eye on and to keep our economy going.
That's exactly my point.
So let's get the latest information that we have, and then let's circle back on this conversation. Maybe you'll figure out a product plan that we can kind of get to, because I think we're all interested in some of the information. I just don't know where it's coming from. Did you have anything else on your list?
No.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sam, did you have any items that were not discussed here tonight that you wanted to talk to our APCHA representatives about?
I guess I'll ask one question as far as HOA insurance. Is that something that's required by APCHA HOAs? Like if a whole building burns down, are they covered by that, or?
Let me address two things. First of all, HOA studies, that'll be coming before us. APCHA has an RFP out for 40 HOA studies. And another thing that I wanted to bring to the attention of the rest of the council that you may not be aware of the random audits that have been going on to see the compliance. I think we have 96% compliance, and the other 4% are still looking for additional data. So 96% compliance is pretty good. It's a good indication that people are honoring the system. But yeah.
Okay, so Sam had I think, really important question about HOA insurance.
We're going to have to get back to you. I can't recall that it being in the regulations, so it would be questionable whether we have a mandate. We probably have a voluntary compliance incentive around it, but I can't give you a straight answer here.
Does the state require that?
The APCHA deed restrictions and the APCHA regulations are the two documents that govern. There is no mention of insurance, nor are there any particular HOA requirements in those regulations.
Yeah, I think if I may, Sam, I think it's a really timely and important question because, as I know, unfortunately, too well from personal experience, HOA insurance is becoming almost impossible to obtain in our valley right now. And if you can retain it, the premiums are doubling, tripling, 10xing, and more. And listen, I'm not going to lie. If I'm a owner of a deed restricted unit and someone tells me my HOA dues are going to go up by 10 times this year because of my insurance for the thing, I might, as a board member, suggest we just don't have it. Like, okay, I'll walk away from my unit if the whole thing burns down and I'll find somewhere else to live. That's not a good place for us to be.
Thank you for the firemen to bring that to our attention.
Yeah. Serendipitous.
All right, we'll find out.
And is there something we can do about it? Maybe more.
Right.
Because if it isn't already happening, that APCHA HOAs, if that's the correct term, or HOAs that have many or mostly deed restricted units within them, aren't uninsured, they are probably underinsured.
And I'm trying to think if they're potentially uninsurable these days. All right, we'll get more information on that.
Scary thought.
I just had a couple of items that I wanted to go back to the rental program stuff. Old versus new units. Are they all priced similarly? I'd be interested in the equity around quality of units and such. So I would again, I think that we have opportunity here for bringing some equity to what we're charging. And I think that in the long term can really help the sustainability and success of our program. So I did have a question around old versus new, and I got nods at the table that said, yes, they are priced similarly. There is no
Discount.
Do you want a quick answer, though? I can give you a
Yeah,
quick
sure.
high level. Liz has been doing some analysis recently on maximum sales price, and the newer units, for example, Burlingame, all were sold at the maximum sales price, and a lot of the older units are not at the maximum sales price. Now, we haven't done a comprehensive view of the system based on age, but that is an analysis that's possible.
And that's for sales units. I was also wondering about rental.
Can we get a survey of what
Oh,
the
sorry,
rental rates are?
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how old the unit is, your rental rate is the same across all units.
So I just wanted to bring that up as like, again, maybe there's opportunity here for more equity about what people are renting, what they are getting, with the opportunity for more revenue. It's kind of where I'm coming at this from. I had another question about rental units with more than one tenant, unrelated tenants. So let's say we have a 2-bedroom that's rented that has 2 occupants, they're unrelated. What I've heard is there is a income cap, right? But for example, income caps for, and I guess maybe a 2-bedroom might be the wrong example, maybe a 1-bedroom. You can have 2 people living in a 1-bedroom, but they can only make so much. So along with this category discussion that we had earlier, it seems like we're making it near impossible for 2 unrelated wage-earning residents to live in a unit.
Mayor Torre, I have to get back to you, but I do not think that is correct.
Okay,
So I'll double check that for you.
okay. And once again, I guess if I'm thinking of a 1-bedroom that has 2 people living in it, and the restrictions on that would not necessarily allow, they would blow the income cap if both of them were full-time wage-earning residents. Anyway,
So in other words, they're incentivized to take a 2-bedroom as opposed to a 1-bedroom, even though they may be dating and sharing a bedroom anyway.
yes, that's part of it. Yes, because they could not
They could not
technically.
qualify for
they
a 1-bedroom,
couldn't
right.
Qualify. But on top of that, if it was a 2-bedroom and they still are at an income cap, it is the same situation that we have along the lines of the category limitations, because one of those persons is not going to be able to reach their earning potential because they would blow the cap. So anyway, I've heard just a few stories about that. I'm just wondering, again, keep in mind, my goal here is to move this revenue model that we have to be more equitable, and I think that leads us to better sustainability, and it could end up happening to really help kind of get some of that developer involvement that we're looking for, because it could change that bottom line and the return on large projects like the lumberyard. And then Ward, thank you for revisiting the 1,500-hour discussion. That was the only other item that I had here. My last comment here is this is super exciting. This is hard stuff, you know. This is really, these are difficult changes. Bill, some of the questions that you asked at the very fundamental and foundation of our housing program need to be answered as we keep moving forward. But this is a really exciting time. You know, this program, over 4 decades old, and we have an opportunity to make some tweaks to really set this up for success going forward. And to me, that this is probably some of the most important work that we're going to be doing over this next year. So,
In closing, I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you all for your time. I probably ran over what I was hoping that we could keep it to, but it's a lot of complex issues. But being involved in CAST and the CAST housing workforce, when we go to those meetings, it just opens my eyes to how far ahead Aspen is than other mountain communities throughout the state and the region, and how much we should be in gratitude to the people that came before us.
Oh, and I'd like to add this, we should take a couple copies of this to our CAST meeting, because I never come home with any. People want to see this. They want to take this home to their community and spread the word.
all right, thank you for that. Thank you guys for supporting that discussion. Appreciate it. We have one more item on our agenda this evening. The last item on our agenda this evening is the Next Gen Commission. And I brought this to this work session because we lost another member over the last couple months. The board, which has 7 seats, had only 5, which is necessary quorum for them. By losing the chair, as a matter of fact, they are now down to 4 members below quorum. And this has been ongoing for about the last 4 or 5 years. And it is taking its toll on our staff resources that come out of the clerk's office for monitoring and reporting and minutes and the like for those meetings. It has also been taxing for the members of that board that have given of their time and have given of their efforts to only not be able to even have a meeting because, it's been difficult for people to show up. We have needs on other boards for these folks that want to be participating in their community. So tonight, and we'll reiterate this when Bill gets back in here, but tonight I'm really asking this council if there is direction for us to decommission the Next Gen board.
Yes. I think the struggles that we've tried to get this to be a functioning board, it's just, it hasn't worked.
Not all the interviews we've had, this has been on life support for as long as I've been on council.
Sam?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, but honestly, I think there should be an informal board. They should not be under the city of Aspen's watch. I would hope the same group of people would meet and discuss things and send us emails and let us know what they're into, because that would be a way more effective thing than being a formal board. So unfortunately, yeah, I think it's can't stick around much longer.
Yeah, an informal board has flexibility on it. You don't have to have core, you don't have to have open meetings. If it's an informal board of people, your idea of having the same kind of feedback, just not as an official board is, yeah.
Yeah, I meant to reach out to some of these members because this was coming up and I forgot, but I mean, I just think they could do the exact same thing, meet without like having to go under the city's rules and then send an
they can
email
have a beer.
their collective thoughts.
Yeah.
And I know I would appreciate that as a next gen age person, and so.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to send a message to any past or present members of Next Gen that their input isn't valued or valuable. In fact, quite the opposite. And I think it's worth noting we're super fortunate to have Sam on this board, who is the only one of us who's in that age range. So helping to represent that perspective in Aspen. And I hope that continues in future councils, is that we have participation of people under 40 up here. I think it's super important. But I echo everything that I heard since I came back from the restroom. Unfortunately, I think it seems to be a waste of resources. I also think the issue extends beyond Next Gen, And, you know, while it makes me sad because I spent a lot of time on it, CCLC, I think, is another example of something that's just like not really doing what it was designed to do. And that doesn't mean that the feedback coming from that cohort isn't critical. It is. But I think just a lot of time and resources are being spent in that forum and not making their way up to us and not translating into action in the community. So I think that there's a different way to effectuate change and to incorporate the very valuable feedback from that group and the group of others. But I do think that starting with Next Gen is a good idea, and I think we should expand this conversation to potentially some of our other boards and commissions.
All right. We'll get into that conversation as we move forward. We just needed some direction on this. Sarah, you're hearing what we're feeling here is that we would be interested in looking at a way to decommission that. But with the, you know, perhaps a meeting with the remaining members or something, or, but we want their participation. We encourage them to serve on other boards. And at the same time, we will continue to work on methods for the input from these various groups. Jim?
Next Generation Advisory Commission was created by ordinance. And
Yes.
would need to be decommissioned by ordinance.
Yes.
I'm sounding like the council wants me and Sarah to bring an ordinance back
Yes.
to you as soon as possible.
Yes.
And are there members of council that would like to have the conversations with the existing appointees?
I would.
Yeah, I think that we could certainly have that, its second reading or first reading, or invite them.
I would encourage before anything is published and after tonight's conversation that those conversations are a priority. And that they be recruited for many other opportunities we're advertising for right now.
I would love the 4 members' phone numbers, if I could get those.
Sure, I'll see if we should have them on their applications.
That'd be
So
great.
I will ask the
I would
clerk's
love to
office
make the call
prepare that.
tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
And then scheduling wise, I think we should be fine to hit February 5th. This is not a difficult for first reading. So it's not just to assist you in those conversations.
Thank you. All right, that was our last item for this evening. Thank you guys so much.
Schedule.
Well done tonight.
Just had it up.
We will be back tomorrow. Thank you for GrassRoots, of course.
Party.
We will be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. And of course, we start our meetings with citizens' petitions and comments. So please, if you want to address council, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Street.
Yeah.